we are getting a striking distance of achieving the double-digit growth. There is only one country in the world which has sustained double-digit growth rate in the history of mankind. Since the measurement of economic growth began, only one country has achieved that, and that is China. China is the only country which has achieved double-digit growth in a sustained manner for a very long time, 20 years or more. And we are now within the striking distance of achieving that growth rate. So we are now there achieving something which was considered impossible. And this change is enormous, from 3.5% growth for 40, 50 years. Today we are talking about 8%, 9% growth. And our population growth rate has slowed down to 1.6% from 2.2% earlier, which means that even if you take our growth rate at 8% and population growth rate at 1.6%, that means our per capita income today is growing at the rate of 6.4% per year. And if the per capita income grows at 6.4% per year, as it is doing now, how long will it take for us to double our per capita income? Our standard of living? 11 years. This brings us closer to what was dreamt by, envisioned by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, one of our founding fathers. That is the change. At one point of time, the rate at which we were growing for first 40 years, it would have taken us 59 long years to double our standard of living, and the rate at which we are growing now in the last 14 years, we can double our standard of living in 11 years. 59 years versus 11 years. That is the difference between our earlier achievements and our achievements now. And I think it is for everyone to see. So that's the first achievement. The second achievement, of course, is that the proportion, the incidence of poverty has come down to a large extent. Curiously, in the 70s, when you were not even born, in the 70s, we were talking about, the election slogan was Garibi Hatao, removal of poverty, elimination of poverty. That was at precisely the time when largest proportion of Indian population was below poverty. And this is amazing. 44% of Indian population in the 70s was below poverty line. So that was incredibly large. We were talking about Garibi Hatao. Malaysia and other countries were not talking about that, and yet achieving results. We were talking about it and not achieving the results. This was old policy. A lot of people believe that the so-called new economic policy is anti-poor, and it is in fact a conspiracy to corner the poor. Fact of the matter is, in the last 14 years, the incidence of poverty has actually come down. From 44% in the 70s, today, or the latest data shows that the incidence of poverty has come down to 24%. So from 44%, it has come down to 24%. If the new economic policy was against the poor, it would have gone up, it should have gone up from 44% to 54% or 84%. It has actually come down. What does that show? It shows that the new economic policy clearly has potential to bring the incidence of poverty down. So that is the second major achievement. Third achievement, of course, and Pramod was mentioning that how foreign exchange was scarce and how individuals going out were given few dollars. Governor of Reserve Bank of India used to get 3.5 pounds per day. Can you imagine 3.5 pounds, which is, and I know the stories, all my bosses have told me that wherever they went and stayed, they could not give even tips in the hotel, because in 3.5 pounds per day, how can you eat and also give tips to people? And they will always get bad service in the hotel where they stayed. That was the crisis situation. And I also mentioned that only $1 billion of foreign exchange was left with us in 1991. That was when the crisis hit us. Today, our foreign exchange reserves are in excess of $260 billion. And we are now 6th largest holder of foreign exchange in the world. Not among the developing countries, in the world. And for a very long time, we were struggling with the problems of scarcity of foreign exchange. And today, economic policy makers, all my friends and colleagues in the Reserve Bank of India, are struggling to cope with the opulence. Too much money is also a source of problem. Too much foreign exchange creates problems on monetary policy front, and it has a different set of problems. But you will agree with me that it is better to handle the problems of prosperity than to address the problems of deprivation. And that is a qualitative change. It is very important to note here that if you look at our track record, with all the talk of self-reliance, sir, every 8th year we were going with a begging bowl to the International Monetary Fund. Every 8 years on an average, from 1947 onwards, you will calculate every 8 years we are going with a begging bowl to the International Monetary Fund. This is not self-reliance. We were talking about it, we achieved it. And we succeeded in many ways, so I wouldn't want to undermine the positive achievements of self-reliance that you said. But that was entirely a wrong notion, because we were given to understand, the Indian people were given to understand that, we don't need the world needs us. There cannot be anything more damaging than this kind of notion. In the days and time when the world is coming together at a mind-boggling pace, to say that we don't need the world needs us, what are we talking about? But this was what was imprinted on our mind. Now, it is understandable. Our fear of foreigners is understandable. But the world is changing. Every country in the world is trying to come into the mainstream. And we were staying away. Today, in 1991, there was this argument made, that this argument comes up again and again, especially from those on the left of the ideological balance, that all these countries are trying to corner, all the developed countries are trying to corner India. Just look at the numbers. In 1991, what was India? India was, India as a nation has 16% of world's population, about 3.5% of world's land, and truly the most brilliant people in the world. And with all that, what was our share in the world trade in 1991? It was 1/2 of 1%. Now, if your share in the world trade is 1/2 of 1%, a common sense question is, why in the hell the countries which have 99.5% share need to come together to corner a country which has only 0.5% share? Is that logical? It's a common sense. There's no economics involved here. But common sense is very uncommon, and we know that. This is a very good example. That it has been very uncommon. We actually believe that the whole world is conspiring against us, and we were not willing to take them squarely on, and we were protecting our interest. And I must say that the policymakers, in the name of protecting the poor of this country, actually protected the corporate sector of this country. There's just no question in my mind about it. All these walls were raised, and all the import quotas, restrictions were there, not to protect the poor. It was to protect the corporate sector, who did not have to face any competition. Whatever they produced, there were enough people to take. The classic example is, of course, the Fiat and Ambassador car. They did not change their engine from 1955 to 1991 because there would be enough people buying the antique stuff that they were producing. In fact, people were bribing to get the car because they were not allowed to get anything else. So that was the situation. That has now completely changed. We are going in a big way, and we have certainly a major player now on the global scene. So we are playing big way, beginning to play big way in the global market, and that is the change. Foreign exchange reserves, I forgot that point. Foreign exchange reserves, which had dwindled to a level of $1 billion, have gone up to $260 billion. And very important, subtle things that I want to tell you. Why is there a talk about India becoming a superpower? Can you imagine a country like India, which was going to an IMF every 8 years on an average with a begging bowl? Can you imagine in the last 3 years, India has become a lender to the International Monetary Fund? This is very important. A country which was going with a begging bowl to IMF every 8th year on an average has now become, not only we have paid back all our loans, we have now become a net lender. In the last 3 years, we have given loan of more than $1 billion. The amounts are small, but the change is enormous. So we have become a net lender to the International Monetary Fund, and that is, I think, an extremely important achievement from the psychological point of view. That is why we have this confidence, and that is why the rest of the world has a confidence in India's future. This is the positive side. There's a negative side too. On the negative side, if I want to name 3, I would say the first one, which is very important from the corporate social responsibility point of view, that while we have accelerating growth, the biggest problem that we have is that we have decelerating rate of job creation. This is extremely serious and extremely important. In fact, in my opinion, that's the #1 problem today. Accelerating rate of growth combined with the decelerating or stagnant rate of growth, the rate of job creation, is creating a wedge, a chasm between those who have benefited from the reform process and those who haven't. You can have, the old classification was the haves and have-nots, but there can be many different ways. And one popular way of looking at it is the India and Bharat. This chasm which is widening is the most serious problem. And I'm going to argue that if we don't bridge this gap, sooner rather than later, our entire social stability is going to be at risk. Let's be clear about this. If we do not close this gap, and that's why I'm going to link this with the corporate social responsibility, but I'll come to that towards the end of my speech. So that is the first major failure or major challenge that we need to face. The second one, that even after lowering the poverty, incidence of poverty from 44% to 24%, 24% is not a small number. 24% of 1 billion plus population means about 28 crore people are today below the poverty line. So India still has a dubious distinction. It has a very large middle class, but it also promotes a dubious distinction of housing the largest number of poor people in the world. Where are we going to go with that? You can't wish it away. We can't shove them under the carpet. We can't. So that is the second negative or challenge that we need to address squarely. The third one, there are many on the third position, maybe infrastructure, social sector, education and so on. But what is closest to my heart is the problem. Just look at our country today. On one hand, we are saying that, look at all the positives, negatives, putting it together, we are, on the positive side, let us say this. We as a nation have never been more confident about ourselves as we are today. At the same time, the rest of the world has never been more cheerful about India's future as it is today. Now this is very good, but I think as conscientious citizens of this great country, we have to ask one question to ourselves. If you rank, listen to this carefully, this is the central point that I'm trying to make. If we rank all the countries in the world by their rate of economic growth, where is India? India is second position, and we are very proud of it, and we should be, and we must be proud of it. So India has now emerged as the fastest growing countries in the world. Number one in China, and number two fastest growing country in the world is India. And we should legitimately be proud of that. Now, just change this scenario. Let us rank the countries not by rate of growth, but by what is called Human Development Index. And where are we? If we, as a nation, if all the nations in the world are ranked by Human Development Index, are we first or second? No. Are we in the top 10? No. Are we in the top 20? No. Are we in the top 100? No. We are 128. That is our rank in 145 odd nations which have been scrutinized or evaluated by United Nations. Now what does that tell you? This is what is causing the chasm between India and Bharat, or those who have benefited from reform and those who have not benefited from reform. This is critical to my mind. How can you be the fastest growing country in the world, but at the same time, you have done so poorly on the social sector that you are among the bottom 10% in the world. The countries which you consider extremely backward are way ahead of us in terms of social sector. I think when we talk about it, is against that backdrop that you have to think about corporate social responsibility. And I'm going to make some strong statements here. It is my sincere belief that with all the lofty talk about corporate sector responsibilities, corporate social responsibility, we as a nation and the corporate sector in India has done precious little. We have been talking a lot about it, but the corporate sector has not anywhere delivered what is required as a part of their corporate social responsibility. I also want to impress on your mind, and I want to tell the corporate sector, and I have been saying this to them, that you should be doing this, you should be doing more as a part of your corporate social responsibility, not with any altruistic motive. No meherbani is involved. Please understand that the corporate sector needs to do this in their own interest in future. Because If we do not deliver in terms of corporate sector responsibility, the chasm, the widening chasm between those who have benefited from reform and those who are not benefiting from reform is going to widen, and it would tear down one day, it would tear down the social fabric of our great nation. That is the risk that we have to talk about. That is the risk that we have to consider. If we do not bridge the gap, I told you about the chasm between accelerating rate of growth and decelerating rate of job creation. Today, our industry is growing at the rate of, finally it is again growing at the rate of double-digit growth. Services sector is doing very well. But look at agriculture. We are doing very badly as far as agriculture is concerned. And what has happened is that typically, a lot of people talk about, a lot of people talk about agriculture, share of agriculture in the overall GDP coming down. That is natural. That has happened in every country in the world. I'm not worried about that. That has to go down. In 1951, when we started the plan process, agriculture's contribution as the ratio of GDP was more than 50%. Today it is little less than 20%. Is that bad? No, it's not bad at all. What is bad about India is that the proportion of Indian population dependent on agriculture has not come down at all. In fact, in 1951, something like 75% of Indian population was dependent on agriculture. Today, about 66% of Indian population is still dependent on agriculture. Now, see the dynamics of growth here. We have the proportion of agriculture in GDP has come down from little more than 50% to only little under 20%. But the proportion of people dependent on agriculture for their means of livelihood has not come down, has come down only from 75% roughly, give and take 1 or 2 percentage points here and there, to about 66% today, which is not big change at all. What does that mean? It means that in spite of the rapid progress that industry has achieved, in spite of the rapid progress that services sector has achieved, these two sectors have failed to absorb the excess labor which is there in agriculture. And remember, the frustration is building there. And that is what can possibly create a major issue for social stability. And one indication of that is the chasm between accelerating rate of growth and decelerating rate of job creation. Some of you might be aware that the government of Maharashtra has appointed a committee, a one-man committee, and I'm supposed to be the chief of that committee, to look into the farmer suicide. And I went around in Vidarbha. Maharashtra has the largest number of farmer suicide. In the 9 years from 1997 to 2002, in 1997 to 2005, 150,000 farmers in India committed suicide. 60% of those, namely about 90,000 farmers committed suicide in 4 states, Maharashtra, Andhra, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. And of that, the largest number is Maharashtra. Maharashtra is supposed to be the industrially most pragmatic state. And yet, why is it that there is the largest incidence of farmer suicide here? These are indications of underlying contradictions in the model that we have followed, and the results, before it blows into a crisis proportion, I think we need to act. And therefore, I want to make an earnest appeal. Sometime back last year, in fact, in one of the big corporate meetings, I said that if corporate sector really wants to do something, there should be a self-imposed rule that maybe 3% of the last year's profit must be plowed back as a part of corporate sector responsibility. Talk less about corporate sector responsibility and do more. The track record of corporate sector here and elsewhere is nowhere near what they talk, nor it is anywhere close to what is needed. I think corporate social responsibility is an aspect that we should all think about, because all of you are going to be absorbed in industry and services sector and doing good job, and which is all good, and I certainly wish all the best for my students. However, you must have this social backdrop, you must have the social perspective, because and again, let me underscore that this is not with any altruistic motive. If you do not what is going to happen if we as a nation do not pay enough attention, what will happen or what might happen is that the social instability would ensue, and with social instability, our entire growth process is, you take the social stability for granted. If the social stability is not there, there is no scope for industry and services sector to grow. Remember that. So that is something which we are taking for granted. I'm saying that don't take it for granted if you do not deliver on your corporate social responsibility. I think that is the message that I would like to give this morning. Once again, I thank the organizers for having given me this opportunity to come here and speak to you. I would like to compliment Dr. B.V. Sangvikar and all his colleagues from PUMBA for having taken initiative and continuing with this great tradition of the annual national seminar this year, and with a theme which is very close to our hearts, India Vision 2020. I wish all of you the very best, and I wish this national seminar all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now request Mr. Rajesh Pavkar to give the vote of thanks.